Well, thank you all again for being here. Claudine, you're an amazing partner. You really understand our work inside and out. And this is one of our favorite things to do. And I think it's one of your favorite things to do, which is to talk about our young people and help lift up their voice. So that's what we're going to do a little bit tonight. Tim, let's start with you. You often say that mental health is the thread that connects every program, service, and resource we offer at Pathfinders. What makes you say that?
Well, it's part of the script. It's what my staff tell me. I just go.
This is what I deal with, people, regularly.
For those of you who maybe don't know this, my background is in mental health. And, Claudine, you just made a comment that really resonated with me in terms of the interns and the training and how we then extend the influence of the work that we do and the way that we do it across the entire community. And I'm one of those interns. I started many, many years ago as a graduate student intern at the organization. And so I learned early on how critically important mental health, mental well-being, emotional well-being, mental wellness, whatever words you want to use to describe that, how critically important that is in terms of the ability to be healthy and successful and have a very rich and productive life. And so mental health, mental well-being does in fact run through every program and service and resource that we offer at Pathfinders because it needs to be that way. We can't really attend to the other needs of our young people and their families if we don't also pay attention to both their well-being and also the levels of trauma that they experience and that they bring to us in their seeking of our resources and support. And let me just make that very specific and concrete. One of our initiatives in recent years has been to expand our capacity to provide mental health resources within every program and service we offer. And we do that for very specific and strategic reasons. We want to make sure that young people have ready access in ways that work for them to those caring professionals who can provide them guidance and support and empathetic understanding. And that's really essential for building trust, for building a relationship that allows us to then move on to help them with their housing needs, their employment needs, their educational needs, whatever those needs may be. Mental health is really foundational to the work that we do, and it's part of what, when we talk about intersectionality of issues and services, mental health is really the connecting point for all of what we do. It's worth saying out loud that there still remains a lot of stigma that surrounds both mental health and the struggles that sometimes accompany being mentally well. Our young people are disadvantaged in so many ways, and not through any fault of their own, but because they represent individuals and communities that we often stigmatize and marginalize. And so that stigma of being a youth or family of color, of being a young person who identifies as LGBTQ+, those are already, unfortunately, still sometimes very stigmatizing identities. And then when you layer onto that the stigma of struggling with mental wellness or mental health well-being, that's just a lot for our young people to try to deal with. And so we make therapists who don't usually even use that title in terms of their work at Pathfinders, we make them readily available in ways that are accessible and that work for our young people. And DeShanda can speak more to this, but one of the things in the last couple of years that has been really interesting and obvious to us, and frankly a bit of a surprise is, and I don't know how much of this has been sort of a result of the pandemic and the increased severity of mental health concerns that our young people across our programs have voiced and evidenced, but they're actually giving voice and requesting specifically to work with and have available to them a therapist or a counselor. And that's not something we always heard or saw in very direct ways. But I think that speaks volumes for both how comfortable we have made our young people feel in requesting that particular type of service and support, but also how to normalize and make that part of what we do and the fabric of the work that we do. And I think that's been a game changer in terms of making sure that well-being, social and emotional support is readily available without stigma for all of the young people and the families that we serve.
That's great. DeShanda, Tim kind of leaned into a question for you, but let's talk about the severity of mental health needs. How did that change throughout the pandemic? What are we seeing now? What types of support are the young people we serve looking for in the small light?
What we've seen is more, not necessarily a change in mental health. We've seen more of an awareness and more recognition, more acknowledgement around what people are feeling overall. I would say that I remember starting at Pathfinders in 2011 as a social work intern and coming in, you're always happy to show up and be an intern and I'm saying to you, like, hey, I'm a social work intern. And they're like, oh, I'm talking to no social workers. Social workers take kids, and I'm like, well, I'm just here to help. And then I realized being here to help, being human, and treating people like human beings was the type of assistance and support that young people really needed. And so as time progressed, we really looked at what it would take to expose young people to the services and the expertise of professionals in the community that they need without making them feel like something's wrong with them. And so as we continue to bring more professionals into our spaces and treat them like human beings, whether they came and in their uniform, whether they came, if they were a doctor and they came in their lab coat, or they were law enforcement and they came in their uniform, we saw a change in the relationships that young people felt like they could build with those professionals. And so over the time, we noticed that Pathfinders serving the majority, maybe 90% of the youth we serve identify as Black or African American. And historically, this is a culture, a race of folks that don't trust systems. They don't want help from places that seem like they're going to separate and disrupt their family. And so as we expose young people to human beings that look like me, that look like you, that were just there to help, they were more likely to talk about their issues. They were more likely to build trusting relationships. They were more likely to receive the support and services for those folks. And so now we see over the pandemic, we've seen more young people that are saying like, I'm experiencing sadness for a long time. Or, these are the types of things that didn't just happen to me, but they also happened to my family. And we see that because we're not setting it up for an hour. We're not setting up therapy, for them to have to pay out of pocket. We're not saying that it's not available at this time or that time. We have therapists that are in our space, walking around, just regular human beings and being available. And so I would say that what's always existed with the young people we serve because of the experiences they had is that they've always had these experiences of not feeling well and needing support and needing just good people to talk to. And so now they feel okay. It is still a stigma, and there's still people that do not trust systems and they don't want to talk to workers and professionals and providers and all of that. But we've seen a large increase in young people feeling more comfortable building relationships with professionals and adults in their community because they're meeting them exactly where they are and they're not forcing them to meet any goals or telling them what to do. And so I think it has just become more of more folks just feeling like, I'm okay with talking about it because you're not treating me like a case or a number. So more recognition, more awareness, and more education around what it means to be not well.
One of the things you say regularly that I love is you speak specifically about young Black men and how there are lots of services for young women. There are lots of services for pregnant and parenting young women, but that isn't always the case for especially young Black men. Would you just voice that for a minute?
So I think if we talk to any group of people, you know, they'll feel like there's more that could be done for them, and there's more services that we could be providing, especially when it comes to housing and it comes to services for families. Men are excluded from parenting services. They don't receive the same access to resources and support as women would. We see a lot of boys and young men that are coming in and saying they want to provide for their children, or they just need a safe space to be for shelter, or that they just need their own house and they want to live independently. Well, they are the priority when we create priority lists. They aren't the priority because of historically, when we talk about housing assistance, we're talking about women with children. And we're also talking about women with children who aren't allowed to have the fathers of their children stay with them. And so I'll keep saying historically, historically over time, there's just been disruptions in families of people that are and continue to be marginalized. And again, we're seeing over 90% of the young people in our program who identify as Black or brown. Then we know that we can go back further into why they're feeling like there's nothing out there for me, there's no support for me. And so we can name a place here or there, but I think it has to be known and acknowledged that we are failing the young Black men in our community, and we need to uplift them because they do see themselves and want to see themselves as providers for their children and their family. But when you don't see that for you, and you're not hearing resources, and you're not seeing your face, and you're not walking into places that people that look like you, more than likely you feel discouraged and that there's something other that you need to be doing to make ends meet, to provide for your family. And a lot of times those things are criminalized because you're trying to survive. And we need to provide access to young men and young Black men being able to live. And there's a lot of discussion happening around that in our space. We have youth leaders, young men who just want to advocate for everyone, but they especially want to figure out what does it take and what does it mean for me to feel supported, for me to feel like a man. And, you know, I think, I want to highlight too, because gender is on a spectrum. So we see like so many different people that come into Pathfinders looking for various services and support. There's various needs. I think that when we're screening them and assessing them for what services are out there, we even find as providers that they aren't going to be prioritized on any list that is independent living. So that's something that we hope to be able to change very, very soon. And I don't think in Milwaukee I don't know in Milwaukee if that's a focus at all, but we want that to be a part of our focus as well.
Thank you. Like I said, DeShanda speaks on this regularly, and I love it. And I think, again, that's one of the joys and one of the beauties of working at Pathfinders is helping lift up those voices that we hear every day and advocating for them. So thank you for that. Let's get a little more into sort of the intersectionality between mental health and homelessness and housing instability. So for both of you, talk about what role does mental health play in the ongoing challenges with housing and being stably housed.
Do you want me to go? All right, I'll start. You know, there's a stereotype that is out there, and what I always want to give the caveat is stereotypes often have some element of truth. So I don't want to deny that reality, that there are individuals in our community who are experiencing homelessness and housing instability, and parallel to that is they're also struggling with their own mental health and their own well-being, and that does intersect. And, you know, one can argue, well, did one cause the other? And I think that actually misses the point. But there's also a stereotype of believing that everyone who experiences homelessness or housing instability must have a mental health problem. And I don't think that is by any means true. That said, it is really hard if someone is experiencing a mental health crisis or longer-term mental health challenges to be able to secure and sustain stable and safe housing. And so it is really difficult to get housing to stick for an individual. And we talk a lot about, can we get the housing to last? Can we get it to stick? And that's actually the harder part of getting homelessness attended to. I mean, it's hard enough to get somebody into housing in this community, but then to get the housing to stick for them is a whole nother set of challenges. It's a set of challenges, by the way, that our staff does an amazing job of addressing. But in addressing that, it is really important that an individual's mental health needs get appropriately met, and in ways that work for them. And sometimes that looks different from person to person. But we do know what happens when those needs are not met. Housing becomes incredibly unstable. And we hear that from landlords all the time, that there's an added challenge and a layer of complexity that is involved with trying to keep people who are not having their mental health needs met adequately safely housed. And so we have this cycle that continues to sort of repeat itself. It goes back to why we say mental health and mental wellness is a thread that runs through everything that we do, because we know if people are to remain stably and safely housed, they also need their mental health needs to be adequately met. And so I think that's a really important point of intersectionality in terms of the work that we do. And it's why we have all of those staff readily available in barrier-free ways for young people to be able to approach them and to ask for help in ways that make sense and to work for them. So, DeShanda, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I know, like a lot of us have probably heard about just in general, like what it means to be a young person in Milwaukee. There's a lot of negative stigma around just being a youth, a kid, a young person. They're all being categorized and put into one box. And as soon as one kid or one group has done something harmful or, what people perceive to be negative or bad behavior, that seems to be the thought process around all young people that are existing in this city. And what we know is that a lot of times what you see in a young person, it could be a miscommunication or a misrepresentation of what they're actually trying to show you or demonstrate to you. And they come to us and they come to Pathfinders and they let us know, I didn't really want to, drink, or I didn't really want to go and steal that thing because I needed to feed my family or I needed to take a shower. A lot of young people that we see, they can't get access from other places because their anger is perceived as violence. Because when they're frustrated and they're loud, people don't want to deal with it. About a lot of times when you work in social services, maybe 75% of the work you do is paperwork. At Pathfinders, about 90% of what you do is you're in the field, you're hands-on, and you're walking right alongside the young people. And so we're constantly giving them the support and education around what it means to advocate for themselves and stand up for themselves, because they deserve to receive the help and support that a lot of these agencies are getting paid to do. A lot of these nonprofits and community-based agencies are getting paid to meet them in the community, meet them where they are. And so our job is to do that, but we're also teaching them how to stand up and advocate for themselves. So yeah, maybe your grandmother told you that we don't keep people in our business and we don't, go and talk to therapists and we don't go tell the doctor every single thing, but we're going to lay it out for them and let them know you deserve to be well and you deserve to be okay. And so the stigma that you're hearing is possibly going to make you more or increasingly not well and increasingly not better. And mental health does not have to focus on your cognitive ability. It also has to do with how can you take care of yourself when you're living just your day-to-day life. We're all experiencing that. Some of us have the privilege of calling friends, of just taking showers and baths whenever we want to, having a nice warm cooked dinner. That all contributes to your mental health or how you feel well. So it's not just about a diagnosis. It's not just about going to talk to this psychologist or this therapist. It is about how can you groom or take care of yourself and how can you make connections with people and how can you build trust. And so we try to educate young people on, it's not all services. Everything that you need to be a person that is healthy and functioning well in this society is not all services. Some of it is just regular, like, go say hi to your neighbor, go clean up your yard, things like that. And so we want to help people to explore more about what it means to be whole and what it means to be well, but not just a diagnosed disability. That is included, and that overlaps, because you can have mental health, you can have mental health challenges and be homeless. They can go together or they can be separate. And if you are dealing with home instability and you have mental health, it's going to get worse. If you are homeless, you can end up actually experiencing mental health challenges and symptoms that are severe and ongoing for the rest of your life if you don't get the stability and overall wellness and support and connection and trust that you be as human beings. And so we do a lot of work with them to just unpack what has been generations of stigma or distrust for what you really need to be able to feel okay just as a regular human being in your community.
And I would just add and echo that. If you don't know that your basic needs are going to be met, if you don't know where your next meal's coming from, or you don't know tonight where you're going to be able to sleep or what you're going to have to do to have a place to sleep, how can you not have your mental health compromised by that? So we do a lot of work at meeting basic needs and meeting young people and their families where they're at. They shouldn't have to worry about getting their basic needs met. Those are human rights, and that has so much to do with dignity. If we can get those met, then we can begin to address the mental health challenges that the lack of basic need provision has created. So you can't separate the two. And I just want to echo what DeShanda was saying, because that's part of the advocacy we also need to do. We're not talking about just, do you have access to a therapist? We're talking about, do you have access to safe and affordable housing? Do you have access to quality, healthy food? How holistically can we look at wellness that is inclusive of mental health well-being as part of the overall perspective of what we need our young people to be able to have ready access to?
Can I say anything? You sure? Because I just can't. Now, I'm ready. Earlier we were talking about, Black men and Black boys, and I would say something that when I'm thinking about mental health and mental wellness and just that concept, the fact that they were so open and willing to say to us that we want therapy services, we want therapists right here at Pathfinders on site, we want them in street outreach, we want them in Southeastern Education Center, we want them in our housing program. That's mental wellness, because the stigma around being a male-identified person, being a Black male-identified person means, maybe you can't express your emotions, maybe you can't tell what's really going on with you. There's a guard, there's a wall up for very good protective reasons, but to be able to say, and I remember this particular town hall because we respect your voice, and that's mental wellness as well, because you got to be able to listen to people in order for them to talk to you and trust you, right? So in this one particular town hall where we had to repeat this event 3 or 4 times because the folks that kept showing up were only male-identified individuals. And this is when we learned that, we want to talk to a therapist, and we want to talk to a therapist in these programs and services. And we were like, whoa, like, what is this about? And these young men saying, well, the reason why I have my headphones all the time, one person doesn't speak for an entire group, but this specific example of, he always had his headphones on all the time. I'm like, I hope you don't have fun in the shower, because, that's not going to go well. And he would always just be listening to music. And he said, because he was hearing things. Mm-hmm. And he could never tell anyone that. And this has been going on for years. And so to be able to express that, there was tears, and there was I could see the weight lifted off his shoulders. So for these groups of young men that were saying to us that, we need therapists here, it just brought tears to my eyes in that moment. And I felt I don't even know the word, but you know, New York, watching a cartoon, and in the background there was like fireworks and cracks and all of that kind of stuff just going off in the air and lights. It was just like a celebration, because to me that meant that they were saying like, I want to be well, I want somebody to care about me, I have things going on, and I don't think something's wrong with me, I want help. So
All right. I have more questions up my sleeve. However, I also want to be cognizant of you all, and we want your voice here today in community with us. So think about your questions. I'm going to ask them one more question, and then we're going to open it up and see what questions you might have to participate in this conversation with us. So Milwaukee County has ended chronic homelessness. United Way is working on a goal to end family homelessness. First, I want you to explain what ending homelessness in any category means, because that's often very misleading and confusing. And then I'd really love for you to tell us if you think youth homelessness can be realistically be resolved.
I'll start with the last part of that, which is,
Okay.
yes, of course it can. And that's a pretty bold statement, because I think for a lot of people, when we talk about the work that we're doing, we talk about the issue of homelessness and housing instability, it feels like a really intractable, unsolvable issue. The reality is it's not. I mean, you end homelessness by giving people housing. I mean, that's it. You give them housing. And then you give them the supports to keep that housing for those individuals. And some people need more supports for a longer period of time than others. But the reality is, if we as a community have the collective will to have more affordable housing available for more people, we can do amazing things in reducing the number of people experiencing homelessness. I will say ending homelessness does not mean that we are able to not have somebody experience homelessness. What it does mean, though, is that when somebody experiences homelessness, that we as organizations and as a community and as a system have a ready and quick response to get those individuals and families quickly housed, stabilize their housing, give them the support they need, and make sure that that experience of homelessness is not repeated. That's what it means to end homelessness. I mean, there is a vulnerability that exists for so many people in our community. They are 1 or 2 paychecks away, if they're getting paychecks, from experiencing homelessness. And that has a lot to do with the lack of sufficient, affordable, and safe housing in our community. And that's something that's beginning to be addressed as well. And I think that's really long overdue and really important. We also need to acknowledge as a community, we have a long history of really horrible housing discrimination and segregation. And we have marginalized individuals and communities because of who they are or what they look like, and have denied them the opportunities to have ready access to safe and affordable housing, much less home ownership, which we all know is really the path to wealth and the transfer of wealth across generations. That said, we are seeing an amazing opportunity at Pathfinders to get young people into safe and affordable housing, to end their lifetime experience of homelessness, and to break that cycle, which we know for many is an intergenerational experience. The majority of older adults that are experiencing housing instability or homelessness in our community will acknowledge that their first experience of homelessness was when they were much younger. This is a unique and important opportunity for us to intervene in more effective ways than we have in the past to serve more youth and young adults, get them off of the various wait lists or prioritization lists that exist in our community, and end that lifetime or that cycle of homelessness. At Pathfinders, about 2/3 of the young people we have already served, who have already graduated and exited our portfolio of supportive housing, they are not re-experiencing homelessness. They are not reappearing in our homeless service system in our community. And that's just for those that we have the data that can support that. We believe that number is actually much higher. This is a critical and important opportunity for a population of young people to be able to intervene in ways that break that cycle. And we know that through Housing First, we know with housing that is accompanied by supportive services, that we can end that experience of homelessness for our young people and their families.
I believe we can end youth homelessness, and I feel like as long as you all here help us out, we'll be good.
You taking my job?
Right, was that the ask? No, but I really do. I feel like it's a lot of work, it's hard work, it's a long game, and we're gonna, put our best foot forward. My start at Pathfinders, we're a very small agency. We did, shelter, had one housing program, our job center, our street outreach, and now we have such a more robust and comprehensive program and so many varying services because we recognize there are intersecting challenges and issues that people are experiencing and go through. So getting them housed, is one piece of the puzzle, making sure that they have access to income, employment, education, making sure they have access to safe people and they're learning the skills they need to be able to be in their houses independently. It's very important, and I think that the more that we grow and connect and build relationships with other services in Milwaukee and build relationships with all of you, we will be in a really good position to make sure that people can be stable, and not only stable, that we as human, we all have, bumps in the roads, and we all make mistakes sometimes, and, things happen. But a lot of us here, we know how to get back on our feet, and we know how to keep going, and we know how to access our friends, our family, and other resources. And that's the position that we want to put our young folks in, because little do you know, they're going to be the adults, very soon, and some of them already are. They're, they want to enter into health fields, and they want to be social workers, and they want to be teachers, and a lot of the social service and helping jobs that many of us may not want to do, they want to do that work, and they want to give back to the community. So it's very important that we invest in them, and that's what we'll continue to do. And so yeah, we believe it, they believe it. We work with youth leaders all the time, and they have so many solutions. And so it's very important that we listen to the folks that we're working with.